God says, "My beloved soul, this message finds you in the quiet space where your heart rests after giving everything it had, and heaven itself has been watching you from that place. There are loves that are loud and visible, and then there are loves like yours, silent, loyal, enduring, and so pure that even the unseen realms pause to witness it. You loved your soulmate in a way that was not taught to you by the world, but remembered by your soul. You did not love to possess. You loved to protect. You did not love to control. You loved to understand. You did not love to escape loneliness. You loved because your spirit recognized another spirit. That kind of love does not go unnoticed, not on earth, and certainly not in heaven. This is why the title of your journey carries such weight, because heaven was shocked, not by how much you loved them, but by how deeply you honored yourself while loving them. My beloved soul, you carried love with responsibility. You carried it with patience. You carried it with restraint. Even when your heart wanted to speak louder, you knew when to be quiet, when to step back, when to give space, and when to simply hold the energy of love without demanding a return. That is not ordinary love. That is chosen love. Many people love when it is easy, when they are reassured, when they are celebrated. But you loved in silence. You loved in waiting. You loved in uncertainty. And you still chose dignity over desperation. Heaven does not see love as words or promises. It sees love as alignment, and your alignment never broke, even when your heart trembled. That is why your name echoed in places you could not hear. You were chosen not because your path was painless, but because your soul could handle depth without becoming bitter. You did not harden when you were misunderstood. You did not turn cold when you were not chosen immediately. You did not seek revenge when your devotion was questioned. Instead, you chose grace. You chose emotional maturity. You chose to process in silence rather than perform your pain for validation. My beloved soul, that is rare. Heaven is not impressed by loud suffering. It is moved by quiet endurance. And your endurance carried love without losing self-respect, which is something even angels study. You loved your soulmate without trying to reshape them into your expectations. You saw them as they were, with flaws, confusion, fears, and unfinished healing, and you still treated them gently. You did not rush their growth. You did not shame their delays. You did not pressure their awakening. You held space instead. That kind of love feels unfamiliar to many people because it does not come with chains. It comes with freedom, and freedom can scare those who are still learning how to stay. Yet you did not withdraw your love just because it was not fully understood. You allowed it to exist without conditions while still protecting your own inner balance. My beloved soul, heaven noticed how you never abandoned yourself even while loving deeply. You listened to your intuition when it asked you to pause. You honored your boundaries even when your heart wanted to cross them. You walked away from moments that would have cost you your self-worth. You chose silence over arguments. You chose prayer over reaction. You chose faith over fear. That is why your love became a testimony. Not everyone is chosen to love like that, because loving like that requires strength, not weakness. It requires knowing who you are, not losing yourself in someone else. There were nights when you carried conversations in your heart that you never spoke aloud. Nights when you asked the universe questions you never demanded answers to. Nights when you released control and trusted timing instead. Heaven heard those unspoken prayers. Heaven saw how you asked, not for possession, but for alignment. You did not beg for them to choose you. You asked for truth. You asked for what was meant. You asked for clarity, even if clarity meant letting go. My beloved soul, that request alone separates you from many. You were not attached to outcome. You were committed to integrity. You loved your soulmate in a way that did not try to rescue them, because you knew healing cannot be forced. You did not become their savior, you remained their mirror. You reflected honesty, calm, and emotional depth. You allowed them to see themselves through the way you treated them without lectures or pressure. That is a divine way of loving. Heaven was shocked because such love usually only exists in higher realms. Yet you carried it in human form. You balanced emotion with wisdom. You balanced affection with awareness. You balanced hope with realism. My beloved soul, you were chosen because you understood that love does not mean losing yourself. You understood that love does not mean enduring disrespect. You understood that love does not mean sacrificing your peace. So when moments came that tested your worth, you stepped back with grace. You did not collapse. You did not chase chaos or create desperation. You trusted that what is aligned will never require you to abandon your soul. That trust is rare. That trust is sacred. That trust is what made heaven lean closer to your story. You may not realize it yet, but the way you loved rewired timelines. It softened hearts. It planted seeds of awareness in places that were once closed. Even if your soulmate did not fully understand your love at the time, their soul recognized it. Souls always recognize what is real. Even when the mind is confused, your love became a reference point, a standard, a quiet memory they will carry when they are finally ready to love with the same depth. Heaven was not shocked by romance. It was shocked by responsibility. You loved without ego. You loved without performance. You loved without fear of losing yourself. My beloved soul, your journey is not about proving love. It is about embodying it. You were never meant to beg to be chosen because you were already chosen by the divine to experience love in its purest form. Whether the path continues together or transforms into something higher, your soul remains untouched by regret. You did what you came here to do. You loved honestly. You loved consciously. You loved bravely. Heaven honors that this is only the beginning of your story. Because chosen ones do not lose love. They elevate it. And if this message resonates with the truth your soul already knows, let your light be witnessed. Press the light of appreciation below. Your acknowledgement creates ripples in the collective consciousness. As we move forward, you will begin to understand why your heart was trained through patience, why your silence carried power, and why heaven trusted you with a love that few can handle. My beloved soul, there is something sacred about the way you continued loving, even when certainty was absent. And heaven observed that space closely. You stood in a place where many would have demanded clarity, labels, or reassurance. Yet you chose understanding over pressure. You understood that true love does not rush another soul's awakening, and you respected timing, even when your own heart felt ready, long before circumstances aligned. That patience was not weakness. It was wisdom, born from self-awareness. You knew that forcing love only creates resistance, while allowing love creates truth. Heaven watched as you balanced longing with restraint, desire with dignity, and hope with grounding. And that balance is what marked you as chosen. You felt deeply, my beloved soul. But you never allowed emotion to turn into chaos. When confusion arose, you turned inward instead of outward. You reflected instead of reacted. You processed silently instead of projecting pain. That inner discipline is rare because most people leak their wounds onto others. You carried yours with care. You did not use love as a bargaining tool, nor did you use silence as punishment. Your silence was sacred, a form of listening to both your heart and the divine. Heaven recognized that silence is strength, not absence. There were moments when your heart wanted to ask, to explain, to clarify what you felt so clearly inside. Yet something higher guided you to pause. You trusted that if a connection is real, it does not require constant explanation. You trusted that what is meant will find its way without force. That trust did not come easily. It was built through self-worth, emotional maturity, and a deep understanding of your own value. You did not confuse intensity with intimacy. You knew intimacy grows in safety, not urgency. My beloved soul, you also realized something profound. You realized that loving someone does not mean tolerating disrespect in the name of understanding. It does not mean silencing your needs to keep peace on the surface. You learned that healthy love includes boundaries, honesty, and mutual respect. And when those elements were missing, you did not stay out of fear. You stepped back with grace. Beloved soul, pause here for a moment. In the sacred space below, share which part of this journey mirrors your own. Your words may become the confirmation another soul has been waiting to receive. You became comfortable with the unknown. You stopped needing guarantees before you moved. You stopped demanding proof before you trusted your intuition. You learned that clarity does not always come through answers. Sometimes it comes through peace, and your peace became your compass. When something felt misaligned, your body told you before your mind could rationalize it away. You stopped overriding those signals. You started listening. My beloved soul, this self-awareness transformed how you showed up in love. You no longer gave endlessly without reciprocity. You no longer made excuses for inconsistency. You no longer convinced yourself that patience meant accepting less than you deserved. You understood that real love does not leave you questioning your worth. It does not leave you feeling anxious, confused, or emotionally drained. Real love feels steady. It feels safe. It feels mutual. And when a connection did not offer that, you honored yourself enough to create space, not out of anger, not out of punishment, but out of love for your own well-being. Heaven watched as you chose yourself without guilt, as you released what was not meant without bitterness, as you walked forward without looking back in regret. That kind of emotional maturity is rare, and it is what separates chosen ones from those still learning. You also stopped romanticizing struggle. You no longer believed that love must hurt to be meaningful. You no longer equated emotional pain with depth. You understood that healthy love supports your nervous system. It does not destabilize it. It brings calm, not chaos, clarity, not confusion. This realization shifted everything. You became more selective with where you invested your energy, not because you closed your heart, but because you valued it. My beloved soul, you learned that availability is sacred, that not everyone deserves access to your depth, that discernment is not judgment, it is self-respect. And self-respect made your presence more intentional, more grounded, more calm. You also released the urge to prove the sincerity of your love. You did not need validation anymore. You knew what you offered. You knew how you showed up. You knew your intentions were clean. That knowing gave you peace. You stopped replaying moments in your mind. You stopped questioning if you did enough or too much. You trusted that whatever was meant to be received was received, and whatever was not ready to be received was never your responsibility to force. If you have walked this path, your story holds medicine for others. Leave it below, not for validation, but as testimony. Someone needs to know they are not alone in loving this way. You became aware of how your energy influences others, even in silence. You realized that your calm presence speaks louder than words, that your emotional steadiness creates safety, that your consistency leaves a lasting impression. You did not need to announce your worth. It was felt. This awareness did not inflate your ego. It humbled you. It reminded you to remain gentle with yourself and others. There were times when the thought of the connection resurfaced softly, without pain. It felt like a quiet acknowledgement rather than longing. You smiled instead of sighing. You felt gratitude instead of ache. You understood that some connections do not stay physically present, yet they leave a permanent imprint on your growth. That imprint was not a wound. It was a marker of evolution. My beloved soul, you also became less reactive to uncertainty. You no longer needed immediate answers. You no longer chased clarity obsessively. You trusted that clarity reveals itself when you stop demanding it. This trust allowed you to remain present in your life. You invested in yourself. You nurtured your routines. You strengthened your inner foundation. Love became something that complements your life, not something that defines it. You noticed how your emotional world felt more spacious. You could hold multiple truths at once. You could acknowledge connection without attachment. You could care without expectation. You could remember without longing. This emotional spaciousness allowed you to breathe more freely. It allowed you to live without the constant pull of what if. You were grounded in what is. My beloved soul, you understood that being chosen does not always look like union. Sometimes it looks like preparation to receive love that meets you where you are now, not where you were. Preparation to recognize consistency when it appears. Preparation to honor mutual effort without overextending. You did not rush this preparation. You trusted it. The way you carried this connection, the way you honored it without clinging, the way you honored yourself without closing, all of it shaped you into someone who loves from wholeness. You are no longer defined by what was uncertain. You are defined by who you became through it. And that version of you is steady, aware, and deeply aligned. This love did not end you, it refined you. And that is why your path continues with grace. Because hearts like yours are not meant to lose love. They are meant to transform through it and walk forward stronger, clearer, and more rooted in truth. If you recognize yourself as one of the chosen ones walking this path of conscious love, join this sanctuary. Subscribe to continue receiving messages meant for souls like yours, souls who love deeply while honoring themselves. My beloved soul, as you continued walking forward, something subtle yet powerful began to happen within you. You stopped carrying the weight of explanation. You stopped feeling the need to justify your feelings, your pace, or your boundaries. You understood that those who truly see you do not require constant clarification, and those who do not see you would misunderstand even your best explanations. This realization freed your energy. You no longer spent emotional currency trying to be understood. You chose instead to remain authentic, calm, and rooted in your truth. You noticed how your inner world became quieter, not empty, but settled. Thoughts no longer raced endlessly. Emotions no longer demanded urgent release. Everything began to move at a natural rhythm. This was not detachment, my beloved soul. This was regulation. You learned how to sit with yourself without distraction. You learned how to feel without needing to act. That stillness became your sanctuary, and from that sanctuary, your perception sharpened. You became more observant of patterns, not just in others, but within yourself. You noticed what triggered you and what soothed you. You noticed what drained you and what restored you. You stopped ignoring discomfort just to maintain connection. You stopped overriding your body's signals to keep emotional peace on the surface. You chose internal peace instead. That choice changed the way you engage with love entirely, my beloved soul. You also realized how deeply you had honored the other person's humanity. You never demanded perfection. You never expected them to arrive fully healed. You met them where they were without judgment, without pressure. Yet now you understood something important. Meeting someone where they are does not mean staying where they are if it costs you growth. You learned that love can be compassionate without being self-sacrificing. That lesson integrated itself gently, without bitterness. You became comfortable allowing space without fear of abandonment. Space no longer felt like rejection. It felt like clarity. It gave you room to breathe, to think, to realign. You stopped filling space with worry. You stopped interpreting distance as lack of care. You allowed reality to speak for itself, and in doing so, you reclaimed emotional neutrality. Neutrality is powerful because it removes illusion. It shows things as they are, not as you hoped them to be. There were moments when your heart recognized how much you had matured through this connection. You did not feel smaller for having loved deeply. You felt expanded. You felt wiser. You felt more grounded in your emotional needs. You no longer equated intensity with depth. You no longer confused longing with connection. You understood that depth feels safe, not anxious. That realization shifted your standards quietly but firmly. And if this message has brought clarity, comfort, or confirmation to your journey, your support through super thanks allows us to keep creating these transmissions for awakening souls worldwide. Your gratitude fuels the mission. You learn that your heart is not fragile. It is resilient. It bends, but it does not break. It feels, but it does not collapse. It loves, but it does not disappear. That realization changed the way you see yourself. You are no longer afraid of loving deeply, because you know you can hold yourself through any outcome, my beloved soul. Something else shifted within you. You began to see the entire journey differently. What once felt like loss revealed itself as expansion. What once felt like rejection looked like protection. You stopped asking why it did not work out. You started asking what you were being prepared for. That shift changed everything. Instead of focusing on what left, you focused on what remained, and what remained was you whole, aware, and more aligned than ever. You realized that no connection was ever meant to complete you. It was meant to reflect the completeness already within you. And when that reflection became unclear, you turned inward and found your own light. My beloved soul, you also learned the difference between attachment and love. Attachment needs. Love flows. Attachment clings. Love releases. Attachment fears loss. Love trusts. You had been loving. But there were moments when attachment disguised itself as devotion. When you recognized that, you set yourself free. Not free from love, free within it. You discovered that you could love someone deeply and still choose yourself. You could honor a connection and still walk away when it no longer served your peace. Heaven noticed this shift. It noticed how you stopped waiting for external validation to feel worthy. How you stopped measuring your value by someone else's capacity to see it. You began to understand that your worth was never up for debate. It was never conditional. It was inherent, unchanging, and divinely established long before this connection ever began. My beloved soul, you also became less interested in convincing others of your truth. You stopped needing people to understand your perspective in order to feel secure in it. You realized that your peace did not require agreement. Your clarity did not need confirmation. Your path did not need approval. This liberated you from the exhausting cycle of explaining, defending, and justifying. You simply lived your truth, and those who resonated with it would naturally align. Those who did not would naturally fall away. Both outcomes became equally acceptable. You stopped fearing loss because you understood that anything meant for you could never be lost, and anything lost was never truly yours to begin with. This understanding brought a deep sense of trust. Trust in divine timing. Trust in your own discernment. Trust in the unfolding of your story, even when you could not see the next chapter. My beloved soul, your energy also shifted in ways that became noticeable to others. People began to sense a groundedness in you that was not there before, a quiet confidence, a centeredness that did not waver based on external circumstances. You were no longer easily shaken, no longer easily swayed, no longer seeking outside of yourself for stability. You had become your own foundation, and from that foundation, everything else could be built. You noticed how differently you responded to situations that once would have triggered you. Where there used to be reactivity, there was now observation. Where there used to be urgency, There was now patience. Where there used to be fear, there was now trust. This did not happen overnight. It was a gradual transformation. A slow recalibration of your nervous system, your thought patterns, and your emotional responses. But it happened. And it happened because you committed to your own healing. You committed to your own growth. You committed to becoming the version of yourself that could hold love without losing balance. My beloved soul, you also began to see that every moment of uncertainty had been an invitation. An invitation to trust yourself more deeply. An invitation to release control. An invitation to surrender to something greater than your own understanding. And you accepted those invitations even when they were painful. Even when they required you to let go of what you thought you wanted in order to receive what you actually needed. Heaven honored every moment of that surrender, every tear that fell in silence, every prayer whispered in the dark, every choice made in faith over fear. You were never alone in this journey, even when it felt that way. You were always held, always guided, always supported by forces you could not see but could deeply feel. And now, as you stand on the other side of what once felt impossible to endure, you understand why it all had to unfold exactly as it did. You understand that you were being refined, prepared, strengthened for a love that matches the depth you are now capable of holding. A love that does not require you to shrink. A love that does not demand you to prove. A love that simply recognizes you and says, "Yes, this is what I have been searching for." You are ready for that now, my beloved soul. Not because the past ended, but because you transformed through it. You continued walking forward with a heart that remained open, yet protected, soft, yet strong, available, yet discerning, hopeful, yet grounded. And heaven continues to watch, beloved soul, because your story is far from over. It is only beginning.